Hello, I am Robbie MacDonald. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Schools in Bangor. And today we have with us Superintendent Dr. Betsy Webb, who will talk to us about the budget process. Dr. Webb, when we think about preparing a school budget, particularly in a system the size of Bangor, it's a comprehensive process. Would you describe the process?
Absolutely. You think about it, we have 11 different schools, we have 600 employees, nearly 4,000 students, and a number of part time employees, whether substitutes or people that help out with extra and curricular activities. It's a large organization, and really the budget process is something we do all year long. We start as soon as we open the doors, we are monitoring our student enrollment. We are determining the needs of those students, which then leads into our staffing projections. We're fortunate. We are the size of a district that we get an economy of scale. And what that means is we're able to look at our student enrollment, and we're able to have our teaching staff and our faculty and administration distributed appropriately across the district to meet the needs of children. So maybe a teacher is teaching second grade in one school, and then if the enrollment drops the next year, we can move that teacher to another school where it increases. So we start with our staffing projections. We then work with our teachers who provide input as to what materials they need based on the children. That goes to team leaders or department heads. They develop budgets which go to our principals. The principals review those budgets, which then go on to the directors. And then all of those budgets move on to the director of business services, who pulls together the first draft of the budget. And that's when I first see the budget. And then I work with administrators to review what those requests are and to make sure that we've used our filters to know, are we preparing a budget that is in the best interest of children, that it drives forward with our mission statement of academic excellence for all, that we are aligned to our 10-year plan so that we are efficient, and then lastly, that we are being responsible to the taxpayers of Bangor. From there, we then present, once we get the final draft, we present that to the school committee through a number of meetings and workshops. And then when the school committee approves the budget, it goes on to the city council, which again, we use workshop and meetings. And then it is voted on by the voters. And that's our school budget is the only budget that the voters vote on in the city.
You spoke about the establishment of filters and the role that filters play in the budget process. The filters also must lead us to establishing priorities for budget expenses. Would you elaborate on how you establish the priorities within a budget?
Great. Absolutely. Really, it stems from our 10-year strategic plan. And, many companies will develop a 5-year strategic plan, but the research is pretty clear that the most effective school systems in our country are ones who set their course based on research of what is best practice for raising student achievement, and you stay the course rather than changing directions or changing priorities year to year. It doesn't mean that you might not have to adjust, but as you know, in our strategic plan, we're looking for academic excellence, professional excellence, quality instructional program, and an environment for success. So those are our priorities, and the filters really help us when we have those difficult questions about, is this something that we absolutely need, or is this a want that we can hold off on? Our first draft of the budget was up nearly 3.5%. As we worked through the process and answering those filters over and over again, we were able to decrease the budget by nearly $1.2 million to get it down to the increase, which is under 1%. It's only 0.9%. And that's what I feel has allowed us to continue to be a higher performing and a highly efficient school system as rated by the Maine Department of Ed. That's not our rating. Those are researchers that have monitored our school budget and our achievement and have given us that designation.
When we think about establishing priorities, running those priorities in the lens of the filters, you sitting with the Director of Business Services, what are those funding sources? What are the funding streams that are available to you as you consider budget projections?
Well, we certainly have our local budget, and there is a state funding formula, which is called the Essential Services and Programs Funding Model, and this is really based on a per pupil analysis of how much it costs to educate a student in the state of Maine to meet the Maine learning results. And the state uses that as a minimum amount that must be raised locally. So we use that funding formula to look at the different revenue sources of local funds, state funds, as well as any revenues we have for tuition, for Medicaid reimbursement, for state agency clients, for our athletic programs. But really the majority of our revenue comes from local and state.
How has that changed in your 8 years as superintendent in Bangor?
Well, it really is a difficult situation because our state funding and revenues have dropped 7.2% in those 8 years. And really what has happened is that there has been a shift that the whole state has experienced from state funding to local funding. And that's why we work so hard to be responsible to the taxpayers of Bangor. So at a time when we've lost 7.2% of our state revenues, we have an average annual increase of under 1% in the exact same time period, trying to understand that we're losing, a lot of money from one of our major revenue streams.
In Bangor, with 11 schools, a number of facilities, employment classifications, full services extended in all of our schools, what are the primary cost centers that you consider when you establish a budget?
Well, we always start with personnel. And, if you think about it, when you are in the people business, it's people that you need in order to educate students. One of my favorite talking points about a school system is the research that shares that the number one factor always has been, always will be, to increasing student achievement is the quality of the teacher as well as their sense of self-efficacy. And what that means is that if a teacher believes they can make a difference, if they believe they can have students achieve at high levels no matter the circumstance, students will. So that's a major cost center. In fact, personnel makes up 80% of our budget, and that's normal across all school systems. And so that's the first element. We then have to look at our facilities, as you shared, and we have older facilities. Our facilities are somewhere between 40 years old to just under 100 years old. And so we are fortunate. We have far less debt than most communities. And one of the reasons is we have taken care of our older facilities. But we have to remember we can't defer maintenance. We have to make sure we take care of those older facilities. I think one of the most recent high schools built in the state of Maine cost over $90 million. And I wouldn't even want to estimate what it would cost to rebuild Bangor High School. It would be very costly. So what we have to do is make sure that we care for those older facilities. But if you look at our facilities and maintenance line, we are one of the most efficient in the state. And one of the reasons is because we don't have that overhead of the high debt. We have transportation, we have student and staff supports, we have our food service, we have special education. So those are the major lines that we're looking at. But really, if you broke it down to what are, if comparing to another business, it's personnel, it's facilities, and it's supplies.
At school committee meetings, you have reference to the school committee state and federal mandates. Some of those mandates are unfunded mandates. How do those mandates influence the building and construction of the budget?
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, we really have numerous types of mandates that we're required. I think one example that I would suspect will be coming is that we're going to have to test water in our buildings. I mean, we were proactive. We wanted to move out and test the water on our own, but I would suspect that somewhere down the line, I mean, Congress did not act upon a bill that would have required all public schools to test water. Often when we get those types of laws and those mandates, which are well intended, I fully understand that, no funding comes with it. So now you have to look at how do we take resources that we're currently using and use it to do that additional task. I know I spoke at a hot stove event with our local legislators from the greater Bangor area, and they asked from the superintendents, is there a list of these unfunded mandates? And I did, share that with them. They had requested, and they were surprised to see it was pages of unfunded mandates. So it has a great impact on our budget.
Per pupil cost is a term that many of our citizens and community members have heard reported in the paper. It's often a term that's referred to by media. Would you explain per pupil cost and then talk specifically about per pupil cost in terms of Bangor's budget process?
Absolutely. The old funding formula was really a reimbursement type of a model where it looked at what did each school system spend in the past and tried to look at, so how would we project how much to provide funding for. So they then looked at a model where, given the number of students you have, what are the resources that are needed in order to help students meet the main learning results. It's more costly to run a very small school on a per pupil basis than a school system that can reap the benefits of an economy of scale. Through those studies, they found about 1,200 was a student population that can reap that benefit of an economy of scale. And so being just under 4,000, we're certainly in that range. When you look at the per pupil basis and the Bangor School Department, 75% of the high schools are spending more per pupil than the city of Bangor. And at the elementary level, 70% of the schools are spending more per pupil than the city of Bangor. So clearly, we are one of the most efficient school systems in the state.
So as we think about the 2016-17 school budget that you're proposing, how does that budget maintain this excellent educational opportunity that we know Bangor is widely recognized for?
But really, it is a situation where all programs have been maintained, and when you look at it, we're only up 0.9%. I want to take a moment to thank the faculty and staff and administration, because they understand how important it is to meet those filters. And it's the collaboration and the work together to determine how can we do that most efficiently. Yeah.
As citizens consider the budget process, both on the municipal side, on the school department side, and ultimately we'll go to referendum in June, what are the 2 or 3 key understandings that are important for citizens to understand about the budget that's being proposed?
I think number one that I would say is to make sure that you're informed and make sure that you vote on June 14th at the Cross Insurance Center. And when you look at our budget, it's $44.3 million, and that's only up 0.9%. There is a question that's not, it's worded in a way that's not easy to understand. Those are not our questions. Those come right from the statute. But basically, a yes vote would be in favor of the school budget. A no vote would be that you are opposed to the school budget. And I really think, if one has questions, we have a wealth of information. We have a whole budget web page that they can access on the school department's website. Certainly, I would be available to answer any questions someone would have, but I think it's a situation where we have received recognition that the quality of education we provide is money well spent. If you look at the demographics that we are an outperforming system where students' quality of education is top notch at a great price. And that's what we're committed to. Every student, no matter their circumstance, deserves a high quality education so that they have as many doors open in their future as possible.